Most people really have no idea how well they're doing financially. They go by how they're currently feeling. Am I able to pay my bills this month? Do I have some extra money in the bank? Can we go out to dinner and not feel like we are going to go broke? Right? If you lose your job, then even if the economy is doing great and the stock market is booming, your world comes crashing down until you're able to replace your income and get a new job. So in this video, I'm going to go over 8 metrics that you could track to know exactly where you stand and what to do next. These are the same 8 metrics that I start out with every time I work on a financial plan with a client. I hope that you find this one helpful. Let's get to it. Now, when it comes to metrics and tracking things, I'm a lunatic. I really believe what gets measured gets managed. There's no way that you're able to see your progress and how you're doing unless you are tracking these things. I always refer to it as turning the lights on. You need to know money coming in versus money coming out, net worth, all of those things. You need to be tracking your financials. You need to run your personal life like a business. That's the only way that you are able to see that you are actually moving in the right direction and manage it and make plans around it and have goals and automate things. It's really impossible to fix things if you don't know what the problem is, if you don't know what you're doing wrong. And most people, they are not tracking this stuff. All right, so let's jump right into these 8 things and make sure you stick around because 7 and 8, they are two things that not many people are tracking in their lives. So, number one, it is your savings rate. And all that means it is how much money are you actually saving out of the money that you are bringing in every month. So, very quick example, if you make $10,000 a month, let's call it $120,000 a year, if you are able to save $2,000 of that per month. And when I talk about save, I mean in even an emergency fund, savings accounts, or in your retirement accounts, IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, 529 plans, wherever you are saving and investing your money, what percentage of your income are you able to save? And 20%, that is the benchmark. If you're doing 20%, then that is considered to be solid. If you want to really go for financial freedom, you might want to retire early. It is wonderful if you could jack that number up to 30, 40, even 50% of your income being able to save and invest for your future. Your savings rate is a very simple number to track, and it gives you a clear window into how you are doing financially. If your savings rate is zero, which is very common these days because life is expensive and people are living paycheck to paycheck. But if you're in that scenario, then it's just eye opening that you're going to have to work for a very long time because the only way that you're able to retire is if you either are going to have a great pension paired with Social Security that will give you enough income to cover your expenses in retirement, or if later on you're able to really jack up your savings and make up for lost time. But you have to start somewhere. So even if you're at zero right now, do your best to even bring it up to a couple $100 a month. Even if you do 5% savings rate, it's better than nothing. And you just need to get some momentum going. But that is a great metric to track to see if you are on a path to being able to retire and when you're going to be able to retire and what that might look like. Another interesting way to look at savings rate is that you're actually living on less than what you're earning, right? So if you are making 120 grand a year, $10,000 a month, and you're able to save $3,000 of that, that means that you are able to live on $7,000 a month. So when projecting into the future how much money you actually need in retirement, you don't need to replace your full income, right? Because you're not living on your full income. When you're retired, you don't have to worry about saving for retirement anymore. You only have to worry about what your monthly expenses are and having enough to cover those expenses. So it also gives you a good projection as to how much money do you actually need to live every month when you back out those savings out of your gross income number. And here's a little snapshot in my financial planning software, Right Capital, where we go ahead and we calculate that number for you. All right, and then the second metric is liquidity, or how much you need to keep in an emergency fund. And this number is different for everybody. I always say, everyone sleeps better if they have $10,000 in the bank. And I do believe that, but that might not be the right number that you should have in an emergency fund. It's just a good starting point. It's a goal to try to get to. But the right amount in an emergency fund, it depends on if you have one or two incomes in your household. If you have very stable jobs with stable incomes where you don't have to worry about getting laid off, like a firefighter, police officer, an educator, right? Or are you self-employed with a seasonal business where you have highs and lows? The amount in your emergency fund, it varies greatly depending on your personal situation. So if you have two very stable incomes, then having 3 months in the emergency fund, I think is totally acceptable. If you have one income or you have, incomes that are not stable at all, then having closer to that 6 months of expenses in an emergency fund might be the right move for you. But everybody's different. I've had clients where they just feel comfortable having a big chunk of money in the bank. And even if I try to talk them out of having too much money in the bank, that's what helps them sleep at night. And that's where their comfort zone is. And who am I to fight against that, right? But at the end of the day, you don't want to have too much liquidity where you're not taking advantage of tax deferred types of accounts or tax advantage types of accounts like Roths and IRAs, 401ks, things like that. You want to make sure that you are firing on all cylinders. And sometimes having too much money in an emergency fund is not the right move. And we can't leave out taxable brokerage accounts as well. If you're maxing out your 401ks and IRAs and you have nowhere else left to invest money, instead of just parking that money in the bank and then the emergency fund and the high yield savings account, a taxable brokerage account is a great type of account to build up. Right? You could open it at a big brokerage house like Schwab, Fidelity, Vanguard, or my three typical go-tos, and you could buy index funds. You could invest for later on in your life, but not for retirement, maybe for 10 years out or 5 years out, or for that midlife crisis area of your life, or maybe you want to change jobs. A brokerage account is a great place to accumulate money because even going into retirement, it will help you tremendously to have money in a brokerage account that you could pull from. And it also adds to tax planning. And when you take Social Security and all those other things that go into creating a financial plan. So don't sleep on opening up those taxable brokerage accounts and investing in there as well. All right. And then number three is your debt to income ratio. Now, banks use this when you go to apply for a mortgage. They look at what your debt to income ratio is. And all that is, it is the amount of your monthly payments, the debt servicing that you have in your life divided by your monthly income. So for example, if you make $10,000 a month and between your car loans, personal loans, student loans, credit card payments, and your mortgage payment, you have to pay $6,000 a month, then you have a 60% debt to income ratio. Banks, when you're getting a mortgage, they usually try to look at your mortgage payment as a debt to income ratio in the 30s, 30, 33% or so. Your overall debt payments, including your car loans, personal loans, student loans, they would like to see a debt to income ratio of below 50%. And all banks are different. But banks aside, this is just a good number for you to track in your personal life. And the magic number for me is to be around 40% for all of your debt payments. So between all of those different loans that you have, to have it be 40% of your gross income every month. All right. So again, you bring in $10,000 a month, you would like to keep your monthly payments towards your debt at $4,000 a month. All right. And then number four is what I always refer to as the happy gap, your cash flow margin, the difference between your monthly income and your monthly expenses. How much money do you have left at the end of every month that you could put towards your goals, retirement, college, whatever the goals may be, right? So we just talked about debt to income ratio. Now we're including all other expenses because for your debt to income ratio, that's only your monthly debt, the payments that you make on that. But you have other expenses in your life, right? Paying for kids' sports, groceries, eating out, all the other expenses. So at the end of the month, income coming in, expenses going out, what is there that is left over, right? The happy gap. The wider that gap is, the happier you're going to be in your life. And the only way to know this number is to track it, to use spreadsheets, to use software. I use Right Capital to track my monthly budget. I could tell you to the penny how much money we spend on my kids every month, going out to dinner on Amazon, groceries, gas, all of our expenses, I track it down to the penny. Now, my wife, on the other hand, she doesn't want to know about it, right? She just wants to make sure that when she swipes the credit card that there's money in there. But me, this is what I do for a living. I enjoy this stuff, right? So I track it every single month and I know how much money we are going to have left over each and every month. To know your metrics, it's the only way that you could go ahead and plan for your future. So your positive cash flow, this is such an important number. This is the driver of the bus. This dictates everything in your life because if you are negative, if you spend more than you're bringing in, then life is very hard and stressful and you're going to have credit card debt. If you have a big gap there, if you have income of 10,000 and you're only spending 7,000, that means you have $3,000 every month that you could put towards all your goals, towards saving for college, towards everything that it is. And you don't feel guilty if you go out to dinner one night and you splurge or you take a trip for a weekend because you know that you have that surplus every month. So tracking your cash flow, trying to get that gap as wide as you could get it so that you could save money every month, that is the goal. All right. And then number five, I talk about it all the time, and that is your net worth. So your net worth is your assets minus your liabilities. It is your financial scorecard, and it is super easy to track. Again, I use Right Capital. This is what it looks like in the software, and it's just a great way to keep your scorecard. So assets, really quickly, they are things that you own. So like your house, your car, money that you have in the bank, your savings accounts, emergency funds, checking accounts, 401ks, IRAs, HSAs, 529s, all assets, right? Liabilities, that is money that you owe to people. So it's not the monthly payment, it's the actual balance that you owe. So the balance on your mortgage, the balance on your car loan, the balance on your credit cards, the balance on your student loans. You add those up, those are your total liabilities. You subtract it from all of your assets, and that is your net worth. Track it. All right, and then number 6 is the progress you are making towards saving for retirement. So the account balances in your 401ks, IRAs, 403bs, HSAs, 457, all your different types of retirement accounts. And according to a Fidelity benchmark, by age 30, you should have 1 times your salary saved for retirement. So for example, you make 100 grand at age 30, which would be nice. You should have $100,000 saved for retirement. By age 40, you should have 3 times your salary saved for retirement. By age 50, you should have 6 times your salary saved for retirement. And by age 60, you should have 8 times your salary saved for retirement. All right, and then number 7, we call our financial independence ratio, or our financial freedom number. And this number is the total amount of assets that you have invested divided by your annual expenses. And the goal is to have 25 times your annual expenses in retirement accounts or investment accounts, brokerage accounts, money in the bank. So, very quick example, if your annual expenses are $80,000 a year, then the goal is to have $2 million saved and invested. And this would be enough where that money would last you forever, where you would have financial freedom or financial independence at that point. So this is a very popular number that's tracked in the FIRE community, the financial independent retire early community, right? 25 times your annual expenses is the magic number. Once you hit that, then you'd be able to retire no matter how old you are, because that money should be able to last you for the rest of your life. Now, that is a very simplified version. It's just a goal to try to hit. There's so many different variables that go into that, like where the money is invested, what your tax situation looks like, and then other things are going to come into play where eventually you'll have Social Security. So that will actually reduce the amount of money you'd be needing to be taking from your portfolio during retirement. But it is just a high level, good number to go for, a good goal to go for, so that you will have financial freedom when you reach that point. All right, and then the final one, number 8, is tracking your rate of return on your investments. I find that so many people are investing in their retirement accounts way too conservatively. And one way to know right off the bat is if you look at your actual annual rate of return. So for example, year to date, here we are, I'm making this video, we're the middle of October. If you open up your 401k or your IRA and you see that you've made around 3 or 4% year to date, then that means that you are investing too conservatively. Now, it does depend on how old you are, what your time horizon is, what your risk tolerance is. But if you have a long time period to go, if you have 10 plus years to go before you're touching that money, then you should be invested for growth. So it is very important to track how your investments are doing and make sure that your allocation is correct, because it has such a huge impact on the final number that you will end up with in retirement. Like year to date, the S&P 500 is up around 13-14%. If you're up around 3 or 4%, that means that you are most likely just sitting in a savings account within your retirement plan, maybe a money market mutual fund, or maybe they call it a stable fund, or maybe it's just in bond funds where you're currently at 4 or 5% year to date. And that is way too conservative if you have a long way to go to retirement. And I understand that people don't like the roller coaster ride of the highs and lows of the market, but you just have to educate yourself more and zoom out when looking at a historical chart of how the stock market performs. If you look at any 10, 15, 20-year period, the market has really always gone up. Yes, there have been terrible years. 2009 was a terrible year. 2001 was a terrible year. 2022 was a terrible year. But if you zoom out, the market, the chart, it goes from bottom left to top right. The markets typically do well. And then once you get into retirement, you get a little bit more conservative and you come up with a financial plan of how you're going to distribute that money. But you could be leaving hundreds of thousands of dollars on the table if you are not investing for growth in your retirement accounts. All right, everyone, that is it for this one. We went through a ton of great information in this video. I hope that you found it helpful. Please make sure to hit that like button, subscribe if you are not subscribed to the channel yet. Share this with anybody else that you think might find it helpful, and I will see you again in the next video. Thanks.